Welcome to the HealthSpark, Igniting Healthcare Management Change and Evolution. I'm your host, Dr. Gingeraya. Hi, I'm Dr. Gingeraya, and today on the HealthSpark, I have Joshua Ortiz-Guzman, Dr. Joshua Ortiz-Guzman. He's a scientist, an entrepreneur, and a system innovator working at the intersection of biotechnology, clinical research, and environmental innovation. He's the director of clinical research at Rio Grande Urology. He leads cancer research efforts focused on underserved communities. He's also the founder of Prodigy Cells Labs, advancing longevity and precision medicine. He also founded Aurum Tech, developing biotech for agriculture, waste transformation, and space applications, with experience spanning gene therapy, microbial engineering. Did I say that right? Microbial engineering. Policy-aligned innovation. Dr. Ortiz-Guzman builds integrative solutions for health, sustainability, and human performance. Welcome, Dr. Ortiz.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, Dr. Ortiz, I've known you quite a while, right? A minute?
Yes, that's correct. I'd say about a year and a half now.
A while. Okay. So tell us a little bit about your background. Tell us what experience shaped who you are today, because you're a very unique individual.
Thank you. I was born in Colombia, lived in Florida, kind of had I'd say a mixed upbringing because my family and we spent a lot of time here in the US, but we also spent a lot of time in Colombia. And so I'd say I had early childhood, a lot of mixed upbringing within the two nations. From that, I used to be pretty good at math. I wouldn't say I'm an expert anymore at all, but it really got me interested in engineering. But as a child of an immigrant, most of the time, if you're kind of good at school, they always want you to pursue med school. At least my parents always, they didn't know anything but the doctor. And when I started college, I really initially started on a pre-med route and really wanted to explore everything in that sector. But started getting a little bit more curious about everything else within biology, and I wasn't fully sold on the med route. And I had a wonderful opportunity in my freshman year of college to explore research. Actually, here at UTEP, so I went to UTEP for my college degree and had my first research lab experience.
Okay.
And my PI at the time, his name is Dr. Rosas Acosta. I think he's still at UTEP.
Okay.
He basically showed me that you take two genes from two different organisms, put them together, and create a new function for that gene. And after that, it felt like it tapped into what I would consider my engineering itch, but it still, stayed faithful to the biology that my parents wanted me to pursue. And so I found like a good bridge between biology and engineering. And ever since then, I got caught on the research bug, and I've been doing research ever since. I graduated from UTEP in 2011 and then headed to Houston, got my PhD in developmental biology at Baylor College of Medicine. And then I led a research team there for a couple of years at Texas Children's. And we mainly focused on engineering different, what we call vehicles for gene delivery into the human brain. That was a lot of preclinical work. We had some experience in clinical trials with the neurosurgery team at Texas Children's. And eventually got recruited back here to El Paso to really lead the clinical research team at Rio Grande Urology and Rio Grande Cancer Specialists. And that's really where I am now. But during this entire journey, I've really been I'd say someone who doesn't really stay stuck in one thing,
Mm-hmm.
and I like to explore. And so before I left, Texas Children's, I had a wonderful interaction with now my co-founder, Dr. Carlos de Laos. He's in Miami. We really started to explore aging and longevity and how we could treat, how we could find different, I'd say, diagnostic markers for aging and longevity, novel one, and then also how we can maybe find biomarkers that can be used as a therapeutic.
Okay.
And then him and I started to explore aging and longevity. He's an expert in regenerative medicine. He's been practicing for many years now, and we wanted to tackle the regenerative medicine aspect with through a scientific lens.
Okay.
Uh, Especially nowadays, there's a huge boom in interest in aging and longevity.
Right.
Um, but some groups, I would I can't find another phrase for it, but I would call them snake oil ish or snake
Mm-hmm.
oil adjacent,
Yeah.
and it's kind of selling people on things that I would say people don't know, and since it's a new market, it's difficult to find things that are truly working. And so we wanted to take all these regenerative medicine aspects and applications and take them through a rigorous scientific um, you know a vision or eye interrogation, let's just say that. And so we founded Prodigy Cells, and
Okay.
Prodigy Cells is really a company that focuses on stem cell banking.
Mm-hmm.
But we have two major arms. We do aging and longevity, where we focus on therapeutics through mainly autologous stem cell use.
Okay.
We track patient outcomes, and we also look at, through a molecular lens, at stem cells and how they're behaving within our patients. But we also have a separate arm, which is a disease and discovery arm,
Okay.
where we do comprehensive banking of tissue overall, through a patient's journey in a clinic.
Okay.
And so we're able to track that patient's journey, look at the data that we extract from their EMR, and then we follow that patient closely with tissue, blood work, to really get a holistic picture of what that patient's disease state is. And then we can actually tell you, the clinic and the patient, how they're performing on the treatment that's being given.
So I have so many questions now.
Sure.
My first question is, so I work with a lot of students, a lot of grad students. I have a lot of career coaching clients. And I think they get hung up on, they meet these people that have kind of always known what they wanted to do. And I think that's nice when you meet people who have always known what they wanted to do. And you talk about your journey and, kind of having the influence, familial influence, where your family sees, your gifts and where they think you would naturally, gravitate or maybe do well. But throughout your journey, was there ever a point where you were like, oh, I should be doing this? Or were you just open to having that growth mindset and just being like, this is interesting, I'm going to grow here? Or like, how did that, like, at what point were you ever like, oh, I fit in this box, I'm just going to go here? I mean, tell me about, or even today, do you think you're X, or do you think you're Y, or do you think you're like, where do you fit in?
No, this is a difficult question. To I guess to answer you, as truthfully and as clear and as transparent as possible, let's just say, the answer is really no. I didn't really like when I started college, I didn't say, I'm going to become XYZ. Like a specific person or a specific career type. Um, Initially, I just started college and went down the pre-med route because it was something that I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
But I'd say where I started to focus on what I wanted to be was really allowing myself to pursue my curiosity. So, obviously for me, you have to be a little practical. You should get a career. You should focus on something that I'd say is a little bit stable, but
Should.
you should allow yourself to explore your curiosities. So if there's something that, let's say, you're interested in, I mean, I'll talk to you in a little bit about something that's completely out of, you know, out of the field in what I'm doing. But if you explore your curiosities, you get to learn if you actually like them or not.
Mm,
So I'd say if you ask me who I am today, I'm just somebody that tries to take what they know and
mhm.
apply it to any field. I
Excellent.
mean, if you look at honestly the fundamentals of almost everything, it's really pretty much the same. There's definitely differences in let's say activation energy.
Yeah.
Some topics are very difficult to break into, but if you boil it down to like first principles, sometimes like most things are the same. And so
Mm,
if you set up good systems, you can understand, adapt, move quickly, and bringing in a different perspective from a different field, I think is underappreciated or underestimated.
okay.
There's different ways of thinking about things in biology that might be useful in engineering. There's a practical way of thinking about things in engineering that is definitely useful in biology. Sometimes I'd say scientists are dreamers a little bit. Um, but but if you start merging fields, um, you can really start to appreciate different things about each field.
Okay.
And so I would say to, if you're a student trying to figure out what you want to do, I would say figure out who you are first a little bit and
Mm,
and give some room to like explore those curiosities. So, when I was in college, I really, obviously I studied and I knew what I wanted to do, but if I never had, went to like office hours to figure out what kind of research is being done on influenza, I would never be where I am now today. Uh,
wow.
if I had never, explored curiosity to go visit, or meet with a regenerative medicine doc that's doing something maybe a little different than what I had anticipated, I would never find a wonderful partner that I have now in my businesses. So it's kind of cementing where you are so that you can have a platform to jump off of. I'd say.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. So, and just to put it into perspective, I mean, we're talking about you start your bachelor's degree. I'm looking at your LinkedIn page from 2007, not to date you, 2007, and then you start Prodigy Cell Labs with your partner, right? And
Yep.
so, what timeline is this? Like, how old is Prodigy Cell Labs?
So it's about 2.5 years old. So it's not
Pretty
too
new.
yeah, it's pretty new. And that mainly comes, I mean, if you're in the the academic route, which I was, it's a very long career.
Yeah.
You do your college years, that's 4.5 years. And then your PhD can be a huge range. I mean, especially now, some PhDs are eternal. But it really kind of puts you in a different mindset too. Um, but like I said, I really like to explore. And so, if you're in academia, if you're a scientist in academia, a lot of times there's also a clear path for you,
Yeah.
which is, college, grad school, postdoc, and then, a faculty position. And in my true tradition, I kind of, bounced all over the place. I immediately from my PhD, I became a director of a biotech core. And so it was a little bit different than what is like the traditional route. And I just started to explore things outside of that. And I wanted to see, how how some of the technology that, is developed in the lab can be applied in clinic.
Mhm.
Uh, and that led me down a completely different route too, because it is a different world. You sometimes, especially in lab, you're in a, you know, you just all you're doing is bench work and or critically thinking about a problem, grant applications, funding. But then when you go to the clinic, you have to find a way to apply it and apply it quickly.
Mhm.
And then it's treated differently. So it goes from being, just out of curiosity to now it has to be curiosity that's applied to generate revenue. And so it's just, you know, uh, very different, but very cool because it's all problems. And so
Okay, so we're going to talk about what are you currently working on. So technically, you're working on Prodigy Cell Labs, but then, where does Aurum come in? Like, what happens?
sure. So Aurum was a pet project. Um, that also has a quite a story. So my PhD was done on the brain. So it was analyzing how emotional circuits regulate food intake. So I looked at the amygdala and studied how the amygdala processes information and how that information controls how much we eat, at what frequency, and how different emotions kind of dictate um, uh, feeding cessation uh, you know, or binging, let's just say.
Ah,
And during my thesis, while I was writing my thesis, I, started to not only explore how different sensory input influences that, but I also wanted to look at the nutritional content of food. And honestly, it was something that like terrified me because I started looking at how, initially it was nutritional content, but then I was like, oh, what's in our food? How does our food get to
love
our table?
it.
And it led me down a dark road, I'd say. I looking at our agricultural practices, how we do animal farming, industrial farming, which is something completely different because
We
uh,
talked about this, right? Tell me.
yeah, because farming we see it sometimes it's like the little cow on the in the prairie,
Yeah,
but when you start getting into dairy farms, these massive farms that are required to sustain the modern world, it gets pretty crazy. Especially if you look at what's applied to our food, to our
how to
soil.
mass produce things, right?
Oh, and it led me down a really terrifying path. Initially, I wanted to be vegan, vegetarian,
Right.
but it doesn't matter what you are because it's so pervasive that it's in every like food that we eat. And so, you know, I it was actually pretty impactful to me, and I wanted to find a way to use my background and see if we can help solve a problem. And so initially, I started with some consulting work
Okay.
where I tried to use some of my genetics background to help some farms out and see, try to look,
Love
work
it.
with and solve some problems. Initially, I didn't know that much, I'd say, about farming. We when we were growing up, we had friends and relatives that had farms of it, but it's a completely different thing to try to change farming practices. And like I said, as an academic, you start off all, you know, like
Theoretical.
like a dreamer. You're a dreamer, and but then real life comes, and you see that even farmers trying to adapt new practices is very difficult because of insurance, because of this needs to. It's just a ton of regulatory and real world
Yeah.
inhibitions.
Yeah.
Uh, but that didn't stop us. We worked with some farms down in Chihuahua,
Cool.
and we also talked to a ton of farmers down there,
Okay.
especially in Chihuahua because there's a huge water crisis,
Okay.
and the toxins that are normal in our farms are even worse down there because as the water levels in our aquifers get lower, we start to dig up the contaminants that have been stinking towards the bottom of those aquifers for, you know, decades now. I don't know if you know this motto, but it was something pretty, I'd say, pretty common in like the 70s, where it's like the solution to pollution is dilution. I don't know if you've ever heard
No,
that.
I've never heard that.
But now we don't have anything to dilute it in. And so, you know, these toxins, heavy metals that we've been polluting our land, our aquifers in, are becoming more and more concentrated. And we're
Mhm.
still using it to water our crops. And so we wanted to find a way to, first of all, reduce the amount of water that's used on crops. And second of all, reduce our dependency on different pesticides, different fertilizers, because the thing is they work. So if they weren't working, farmers wouldn't use them.
Okay.
The fertilizers work. You use a fertilizer and you get a good yield. You use a pesticide, it gets rid of the pests. Um, but the thing is, and the reason why it leads to desertification is because you start destroying the topsoil on
Mm.
all farms. You start removing all the nutrients, and it's because you're giving the soil kind of like a boost, but it has nothing to give anymore.
Ah,
And so you keep adding and adding and adding, and it has nothing to give. And so Aurum was really founded to try to restore soil.
okay.
So it was a way of finding different microbes and finding different substrates that we could use in the soil to regenerate the soil. So there's kind of like a common theme, which is all regenerative medicine, regenerative agriculture, and it's a way to help the soil and help the body really repair itself.
Okay.
And so that's how Aurum was started. I have a wonderful partner there. His name is Gabriel Garcia, and it really is to focus on soil restoration. But we we have our eyes on not just Earth but beyond. So basically, you know, if we're trying to restore dead or desertified soils, we want to be able to use our technology on lunar or Martian soil. So
Wow.
get something that is truly what we call terraforming, and that's one of our current projects.
Cool. That's so cool. Oh
Yeah,
my
thank you.
God. So how long have you been doing that? Since 2023, it says?
Yeah, so it was officially founded then, but I've been doing um, Aurum for maybe like 4 or 5 years now.
Wow.
Yeah, but we officially founded it in 2023. Yeah.
So amazing. So amazing. Oh my God. Okay. So let's talk about your entrepreneurial spirit. So I mean, what we talked about this before. So I mean, what keeps you hungry? Like what keeps you innovative? Like I don't imagine that you're ever going to stop, that you're ever going to and I don't know that satisfied is the right word because I hope you're never satisfied,
Yeah, yeah.
Joshua, because then what's the point? Like I hope someone like yourself is always going, always burning, always finding something to be excited about. So what drives your innovation?
Well, I mean, I would say the innovation really started when I was younger. So this is, I'd say, a little bit of like a personal story. But when I was younger, my mom had this thing called hydrocephalus,
Okay.
and it's basically just this swelling, or well, it really stands for water in the brain.
Okay.
So basically, it's this swelling that occurs. Usually, it's through some sort of obstruction of some cyst that starts to balloon out and cause your brain to look like if you look at it through X-ray or MRI or anything, it looks like an empty space.
Okay.
And that was really impactful for me because when they did a surgery, they put this shunt in, and
Okay.
that shunt is pressure driven, and it allows liquid to be emptied out at a very specific pressure, and then it goes into the bladder, and you basically remove it that way.
Mhm.
And that for me made a huge impact because I saw how an application of engineering and biology completely solves, I'd say, life-threatening, destructive illness. And it's always had a huge impression on me. And the reason I want to keep innovating is because I think through innovation, we make, I'd say, lives better. I think there's we can always find a solution to problems. I am a true believer in human ingenuity, and the ability to solve problems. And I think, especially as I get older, I just want to be able to innovate and grow and leave something for the next generation that comes, because they need to be innovators and they need to grow as well. And so the reason I don't stop is because I do see kind of like this spirit of ingenuity in everyone.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you just keep going, keep succeeding, there's nowhere that at least humanity can't get to. And so that's really what drives me. Uh, there are things, maybe also I've been influenced by some sci-fi when I was younger, um, that really make me want to get to want to get to that. When I was younger, we would talk about the future, which is now, like the 2025, 2030, as this completely advanced species and civilization. And I feel like we had a lull for some time.
Yeah.
And I really just want to be, even if it's like a grain of sand on a pile, at least a grain of sand on the pile towards towards like a improving civilization.
Cool. All right. So from your perspective, I want to talk about like threats to the industry. And so and you're so diverse. So, I mean, thinking about clinical, academic, entrepreneurial roles, what do you think are the most pressing challenges facing, and I say the future of healthcare, but maybe for you, it's multiple industries. Like, what are you most concerned about right now? What keeps you up at night, if anything?
Well, um, honestly, it's demand and quality.
Mm,
So as what I've seen in across industry, as the demand for almost everything has grown exponentially.
mm,
Healthcare, food, um, uh, social connection, everything is that the demand is there and there's not enough meeting those demands. In healthcare specifically, this is something even more prevalent, I'd say, in the Borderplex region, El Paso, but the amount of doctors that are graduating now too, um, huge decrease, but there's a massive increase in the demand for, visiting a doctor, getting your care, and then at the same time, like society in general is less healthy. Our obesity rates are soaring. These chronic illnesses are soaring. And for me, the biggest threat that I see is to meet that demand. Unfortunately, because there's not enough people, you drop in quality. And
yes.
so that for me is one of the biggest issues that I see. It's not enough doctors for the amount of people. And we really need a change. I mean, I know there's people working on this, and like I said, I'm a huge believer in innovation, but that is one of the biggest difficulties is really a decline in quality
Mhm.
across the board.
Mhm.
And for me, that's one of the biggest poisons, because it's difficult sometimes to define quality. And so to put a metric on that is difficult. Like we are all aware of it, but it's difficult to really pinpoint, decrease, increase in quality, but we're all aware of it. And I feel like across the board, I'm seeing that, not just in healthcare. I see it in food. I see it in the service industry. And so I think that's one of the biggest challenges because I think we'll get to a point of conformity.
Yeah.
And because all the standards across the board are lowered, it's even worse because then it's difficult to identify what's good.
Yeah. Well, everything you've said already scares me, right? Our food quality, our air quality,
Yeah.
our soil quality.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I'm super freaked out. You know what? I was going to ask you earlier, is there anything that you recommend as far as ways that we can educate ourselves as consumers about, because I hate
Oh,
to say, watch this Netflix documentary. That sounds lame. But is
yes.
there anything that, you recommend
So,
for people to
so
educate on?
no, so I'm glad you asked that question because I think that goes into, I'd say, maybe my second fear or second concern.
Great.
And it's I'd say I call it especially lately, the bright age. So we had our dark ages.
Mhm.
Everyone is super familiar with that. It was really marked by censorship.
Mhm.
But I consider nowadays for it to be the opposite, but not in a beneficial way. I call it the bright age just because anything you want is at your fingertips.
Yeah.
So if you are looking for how do I do this and what's the best, you'll find it. And that is for me a little bit scary because the reason I call it the bright age is because light can be blinding as well.
Mm.
So specifically, you asking me like what are the best ways? It sucks because you can go to Google and you can type in what are the best ways, and you'll have millions of responses.
Yeah.
And that sometimes is also concerning because it is maybe unintentionally a form of censorship. It's just too much information.
Mm. It's not
Uh,
scholarly peer reviewed.
yes, it's information overload, and you have now just too many competing voices that it reduces the
Mm.
signal. And so everything becomes noise. And that's a huge concern. But to your question, I'd say some of the best things to really do. I'm not a huge fan of documentaries, but I'd say some of the best things to stay in touch with for me ends up being a little bit more local,
Okay.
because you can get some firsthand accounts on how maybe like a farmer is doing,
Mm.
his complaints about the land, his complaints about his own agricultural practices and why he does what he does. And then if you are informed, it's just working with him. I think we've just disconnected too much from our community. We don't know where our food comes from. We don't
I
know,
love it. That's a great.
yeah, where our water comes from. We don't know where our
Mm.
waste goes. And
Mm.
we don't know, like, we don't know a lot of things, and I think it comes down to there's less social cohesion. And so I really do think that the best thing is being active in your community, learning from your peers what might be going well for them, what might not be, being involved with your local politicians. I think
Yeah.
sometimes our representatives, we can get mad at them
Yeah.
for what they're doing, but sometimes the burden is on us as well to just talk to them,
Yeah.
to tell them what's going on in your community, and what might benefit your community. Sometimes they're so busy they don't know.
That's great advice. That's great advice. Okay, so my last question is about encouraging others to take chances. So
Sure.
frequently I meet, emerging leaders, sometimes seasoned executives, and they are afraid. They're afraid to take chances. They're afraid to take risks, and especially in business. And they've always thought about, oh, I want to try this, but I'm afraid, or I'm going to wait until everything's perfect. I'm waiting until, you know, business conditions are right, or the economy is better, or yeah, I don't know. There's always some element, but you have to take risks. And I think to me, it just seems like you were just unafraid and unbothered. So tell us about how you've taken risks in your own career and how you encourage others to take chances in business, in leadership, in your entrepreneurial ventures?
Sure. I mean, risk is risk is risk is risk. But the way I see it is that sometimes we're a little blind to risk. And so the way that I try to like turn it around for some people is I tell them that not acting on those opportunities is a risk in itself.
Mm,
Staying at like, fully in the slot that you maybe might be unhappy, is a risk because as you get older, it's going to be harder for you to transition. And so the way I say it is kind of like that saying with planting a tree, like the best day to plant a tree is today or 2 weeks ago.
mm,
Uh, because a lot of these things take time to, first of all, to mature, and second of all, the older you get, the harder it is to sometimes recover from those risks.
yeah,
But at the end of the day, you don't want to be kicking yourself 10, 15 years from now saying I should have done it,
yeah.
you know?
What, and we talked about this the last time, is what about the role of fear and failure? Like how weren't you afraid? Aren't you afraid of failing?
Uh, that's a difficult question to answer because it uh the answer I'm going to give sounds like I don't care, but I absolutely care. I actually really care about failure, but it's almost I will tell you at the same time I don't care.
Yeah,
Um, because you won't be able to learn without some problems, um without failing. I mean, I'm telling you about all the positives, but there have been tons of failures. There have been things that didn't work. There have been some equipment that didn't arrive for a big project, a deadline that was missed that cost an opportunity. But you don't know that because
right.
every time that there was a failure, there's a correction. So the equipment didn't get here. All right, well, we shouldn't have engaged with that partner until this was ready. Oh, the random thing that happened, you set up these awesome, I'd say, nets for those failures. I think the biggest problem with failure is if you don't learn from it.
Absolutely. That amazing. Thank you so much, Joshua. Well,
Sure.
thank you so much for spending time with us. I learned so much from you, and I know our audience is going to learn so much from you. Again, we're going to share all of your social media links so that people can reach out to you if they'd like to learn more. And again, this was Dr. Joshua Ortiz-Guzman, from founder of Aurum, founder of Prodigy Cell Labs, and again, entrepreneur, researcher, you name it. Thank you so much, Joshua.
Oh, thank you so much, Ginger. I appreciate you having me.
Thanks.